High in the Himalayas of Kashmir and Ladakh, 205 kilometers east of Srinagar, 234 kilometers to the west of Leh, is a small town whose name is made up of two words, Khar and Kil. Khar means castle, Kil means center. So, a place between castles, as the land historically lay between kingdoms. In 1999, this place became the center of much international intrigue and war between India and Pakistan. My name is Kabir Bedi, and today on Guns and Glory, we will talk about the time when India, at Kargil, had to fire over 250,000 shells, bombs and rockets across the LOC to bring Pakistan to its senses. On 20th of February 1999, at the Wagah border, the Prime Minister of Pakistan waited to receive his guests. This was the inaugural trip of the Delhi-Lahore bus service and the first visit to Pakistan by an Indian Prime Minister in 10 years. When Prime Minister Atal Bihari Vajpayee alighted from the bus, it seemed that the ice of suspicion and misunderstanding between the two neighbors was finally on the verge of a thaw. As Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif stepped forward, first there was a handshake, and then the Prime Minister of India initiated a hug, which seemed to be grudgingly reciprocated by the Prime Minister of Pakistan. Across Pakistan, there had been agitations against the visit. In Karachi, a cardboard replica of the bus had been burnt. In Lahore, a policeman had died. And one of the most, if not the most powerful man in Pakistan was conspicuous by his absence. Pakistan's Chief of Army Staff, General Pervez Musharraf, had boycotted the event at Wagah. Prime Minister Vajpayee told the people of Pakistan that his message to them was short and simple. Put aside the bitterness of the past and let us together make a new beginning. In November 1998, about 3 months before Atal Bihari Vajpayee set off on the bus to meet Nawaz Sharif, Lieutenant General Mahmood Ahmed, an artillery officer commanding the 10 Corps in Pakistan, went to meet his chief, General Pervez Musharraf. Lieutenant General Ahmed was accompanied by Major General Javed Hassan, who commanded the frontier constabulary of the northern areas. Present at this meeting was a fourth general, Lieutenant General Muhammad Aziz, a Kashmiri by birth, who at that time was Chief of General Staff in the Pakistan Army. These four generals, in November 1998, decided to dig up and execute a plan that had been made but shelved many years ago. In the Kargil district of Jammu and Kashmir, the winter is long and harsh, and the summer short and dry. In summer, temperatures can go up to 30 degrees Celsius. In winter, they can plummet to -35. Along the entire western border of the district runs the disputed LOC, the line of control that divides Kashmir between India and Pakistan. The contours of the line of control are maintained by the armies of both the countries, who man bunkers and posts along the demarcation. But in this desolate landscape, there existed an unwritten understanding. In the cold harshness of winter, the armies would climb down from the highest of their posts and leave them unattended till the summer. This understanding ended in 1999, when 4 Pakistani generals put into motion a simple but devious plan to destabilize the status quo. From Rawalpindi Army Headquarters, a secret order went out. Occupy the bunkers and posts in the Dras Kargil sector that the Indian Army had vacated in the winter of 1998-99. Unknown to Vajpayee, and possibly even to Nawaz Sharif, as India and Pakistan were announcing to the world the beginning of a new era in Indo-Pakistan relationship. Pakistan's Northern Light Infantry had already occupied 132 Indian posts and controlled an area of about 130 square kilometers that stretched over a 100-kilometer front with depths ranging between 7 to 15 kilometers inside Indian territory. And yet, during this period, on March 21, 1999, Prime Ministers Vajpayee and Sharif signed the Lahore Declaration. In the last days of April 1999, Tashi Namgyal, Morup Sering and Ali Raza Stanba from the tiny village of Garkhun took their flock of sheep up to the Banju Heights near Kargil. Morup carried with him his prized possession, a pair of powerful binoculars. On the morning of May 3rd, Tashi Namgyal borrowed the binoculars to look for game to hunt. But what he saw were men in Pathan suits digging bunkers.
वहाँ हमें को 6 आदमी नजर आई है, कोई काला रंग का ड्रेस लगा हुआ था, तो मैंने थोड़ा सा देखा उसमें, तो पत्थर डोल रहा था, बर्फ हट रहा था.
Over the next few days, the army sent out a few patrols, and while they did encounter some hostile elements and some skirmishes took place, the extent of the excursion was not known until Captain Saurabh Kalia's entire patrol went missing. IC 58522F, Lieutenant Kalia was commissioned into the Indian Army in December 1998. The 22-year-old officer joined the 4th Jat Regiment and was posted to Kargil in January 1999. On May 15th, Lieutenant Kalia and 5 soldiers were on a patrol in the Bajrang post in the Kaksar sector of Jammu and Kashmir. For 22 days, there was no news of Lieutenant Saurabh Kalia and his patrol. Well after war had already broken out in Kargil, their mutilated bodies were handed over to India. Autopsy reports showed extreme torture, including cigarette burns, eardrums pierced with hot rods, and amputated limbs. 14 years later, a former soldier of Pakistan's Northern Light Infantry appeared on a video clip claiming to have been one of the Pakistani soldiers responsible for the death of Lieutenant Kalia.
उनके 6 बंदों ने लेफ्टिनेंट कालिया के साथ रेकी के लिए हमारी तरफ एडवांस किया, मगर जब वो करीब आए हम उन्हें कैदी बनाना चाहते थे, लेकिन वो थोड़ा हमारे रेंज से दूर वो हमसे भागने की कोशिश कर रहे थे, हमने उनके ऊपर फायर गिरा दिया.
Lieutenant Kalia and his patrol were captured and killed because they had seen the intruders. The Northern Light Infantry were taking no chances. While successive foot patrols and chopper reconnaissance by the Indian Army did find proof of incursions, it was not till the middle of May 1999 that the larger picture became clear.
Initially, we thought it was just the infiltrators, the Mujahideen. But then, as we started launching a series of probing attacks, we found that it was not the Mujahideen, it was the regular Pakistan army.
This was no ordinary infiltration, but a full-scale occupation. And the Indian Army needed to retake those positions with force. About 1 year before all this happened, the BJP-led NDA coalition had come to power in Delhi. In its election manifesto, the BJP, among other pledges, had promised the induction of nuclear weapons. On May the 11th and May 13th, 1998, India had stunned the world by conducting 5 nuclear tests. 15 days later, on May 28th, Pakistan announced its entry into the nuclear club with tests of its own. A shocked international community immediately imposed sanctions on both countries. So in May 1999, when India began to fire the massive Bofors guns to drive Pakistan out of Kargil, there was great fear that this conflict between neighbors would end in a nuclear war. The ferocity of the Indian artillery response was unprecedented. No single piece of artillery proved more valuable in the assault than the Bofors FH-77B 155mm howitzer. Its long-range heavy-caliber shells easily destroyed flimsy enemy bunkers. The Bofors guns, which had a range of 24 kilometers at sea level, were found capable of firing beyond the 40-kilometer mark in the rarefied atmosphere of Kargil. The Indian Army deployed 130 Bofors guns. Most of them came under the command of a man who came to be known as the Enraged Bull of Dras.
Bofors has each shell weighing 43 kilos. So every shell which you fired on them did make a dent in the enemy defenses and did cause a lot of casualties. I think one of the major reasons the enemy drew back from these places was because of the Bofors firing.
As commander of the 8th Mountain Division's artillery brigade at Dras, Brigadier Singh lined up all the guns in his batteries and concentrated on one objective at a time. In one crucial assault, 100 guns concentrated their fire at one point, point 5140 in Tololing.
We made sure that every time we attack an objective, we had adequate guns to pound that objective, so we don't suffer casualties.
India's 56th Mountain Brigade was deployed to the Dras sector in the second half of May. Pakistani positions along the Tololing complex formed the deepest incursions into Indian territory. As the NLI had begun to target indirect fire onto the Srinagar-Leh highway,
Tololing was the furthest deepest penetration which Pakistan Army had carried out, and it was threatening to cut off the national highway leading to Leh, and all enemy had to do from there was to roll down.
Tololing had to be cleared fast, so the 56th Mountain Brigade committed 2 infantry divisions to the task. The 18 Grenadiers went for the Tololing top, and the 1 Naga went for point 5140.
There was no time even for reconnaissance or carrying out proper acclimatization. We were just given order to capture Tololing at the earliest, and there was hardly any artillery support available at that time.
The attacks began on 22nd May. That's when the 18 Grenadiers and the 1 Naga discovered that the Pakistani positions were extremely well defended. Movement was slow. The Indians had to crawl up rocky cliffs under intense fire. After a week of inching forward, the twin assaults were halted by very heavy Pakistani fire. After 8 days of battle, the Grenadiers suffered more than 150 casualties, and the 1 Naga fared no better.
Tololing was the most fierce, deadliest and bloodiest battle which we encountered. We suffered very heavy casualties since enemy was on dominating heights.
The units initially deployed to Kargil arrived ill-equipped to face the hardships of mountain warfare. The troops were not even fully acclimatized, and they had not counted on such well-entrenched and well-equipped enemy forces. But the Indian Army quickly retooled its approach to face the rigorous challenges of a high-altitude war. The 2 Rajputana rifles were deployed to Sonamarg and carried out acclimatization and strategic training before moving to take up positions at Dras. The battalion requisitioned appropriate gear to suit the climate. On the 3rd of June, the 2 Raj Rif, under the command of Lieutenant Colonel M.B. Rabindranath, reported to the 56th Mountain Brigade and were given immediate orders to seize Tololing.
We tried to maintain surprise, or we actually succeeded in maintaining surprise by dumping ammunition only at night for 6 days. And then after 6 days, final day we actually went and lied dogo next to the objective areas for whole day without moving, and then attacked the next day.
On the night of June 12th, 20 artillery batteries consisting of 120 guns began a continuous 6-hour barrage aimed at Pakistani positions on the cliff tops. The 18 grenadiers, who were stuck midway up the ridge, set up their own barrage. Under the cover of this tremendous cannonade, the two Rajrif moved towards Tololing Peak along both the chosen axes. The big guns kept firing till the Indian attackers were a mere 200 meters from their objective. When they suddenly fell silent, the Rajrif soldiers, supported by fires from the 18 grenadiers, decimated the Northern Light Infantry and took possession of Tololing Top.
My unit and 2 Rajrif finally captured Tololing on 13 June 1999, and I lost 25 brave officers, JSUs and men.
About 3, the enemy again tried to retake Tololing Top by attacking, launching a counterattack. But I think the numbers were in our favor, so we were able to beat back the attack.
On June the 13th, amid heavy shelling, Prime Minister Vajpayee paid a visit to Kargil to boost the morale of the Indian troops. India was determined to hit back hard. But let's leave the war on the ground for a moment and take to the skies, because the use of the Indian Air Force in the conflict set Kargil apart, it being considered a war and not just a border skirmish. The Indian Air Force began offensive operations at 0630 hours on May 26th. 6 successive attacks were launched using MiG-21s and MiG-27s. The targets were intruder bunkers, supply lines and supply dumps in the Dras and Batalik sectors. They used rocket attacks and strafing passes over enemy dugouts in the face of intense enemy fire. And Mi-17 helicopters attacked positions on Tiger Hill.
Because we were not allowed to cross the LC, we had to be dependent on what the army tells us is the position of some targets. And these targets were not easily seen, not even from the ground, leave alone from the air. But our strategy was to hit those targets as best as we could.
India took a major decision in launching the IAF into action in Kargil. The fear was it would escalate the scale of war and hostilities might not be limited to the Kargil sector. It was a calculated risk that India had to take, but a necessary one.
Had Pakistan decided to use their Air Force in anger on our side, we would have lost a tremendous amount of, we would have had a tremendous amount of casualties, because our people were out in the open without any defenses at all.
But on the second day of the air attacks, disaster struck. A Haina formation of MiG-27s took off, tasked with destroying enemy positions in the Batalik subsector. Each MiG-27 carried 40 deadly 80mm rockets and was armed with 30mm cannons. Flight Lieutenant K. Nachiketa was flying number 2 to Squadron Leader A. Mandokhot. Zeroing in on the target, Flight Lieutenant Nachiketa fired all his 40 rockets in one salvo. He came back for a second attack with his 30mm guns.
Nachiketa, unfortunately, he fired his weapon, and there is a disadvantage on that type of aircraft, the MiG-27, that when this sort of armament, this sort of rocket is fired, there is a chance, I repeat, there is a chance that some engine malfunction could occur. There were so many others, and this was his second attack in that particular area. Only in this second attack there was a problem and his engine malfunction, and he was too low at that time, and he punched out. He punched out and he was taken prisoner of war.
When Flight Lieutenant Nachiketa ejected, Squadron Leader Ajay Ahuja, also airborne on a mission at the same time, stayed over the area in an attempt to spot his landing site to direct rescue helicopters to pick him up.
So he trying to look for it, he started to turn around, and his aircraft was heavily loaded. And in the result, and it was underpowered as well. That type of aircraft is generally underpowered. So he lost height. He came within the range of the surface-to-air missiles and got shot.
Squadron Leader Ahuja was flying on the Indian side of the LOC when he was hit. He was posthumously awarded the Veer Chakra. Then again, on May 28th, a Mi-17 helicopter on an attack mission at Taloling was destroyed by a Pakistani shoulder-fired missile. The entire crew of 4, Squadron Leader R. Pundhir, Flight Lieutenant S. Muhilan, Sergeant R. K. Sahu, and Sergeant P.V. N.R. Prasad were killed.
The missile didn't come from the target that he was attacking. The missile came from the side, which only gave the indication that the number of missiles they had was quite a lot. So from then onwards, after the third day, we took the helicopters off combat duties and we raised the height of operation to above the danger height of the missiles. And we said, all right, we will operate at those heights and we will drop bombs from those heights.
The IAF suspended attack helicopter operations, but the air attack continued effectively. In Kargil, it was a real challenge for fighter pilots not to stray over the LOC as ordered. But air warfare at such heights had other major challenges too. In those mountains, supersonic jets could see their targets only at the last minute. Also, aircraft and ammunition did not behave as per norms, so the IAF had to adapt. In 50 days, what the IAF learnt and put into practice in Kargil is now taught to fighter pilots across the world. For now, let's leave the IAF pounding Pakistani positions as I, Kabir Bedi, say goodbye, and in the next episodes of Guns and Glory, we'll join the ground troops as they scale the treacherous slopes to regain the heights of Kargil. The business of war is hard and cruel irrespective of which side you're on. A captured diary of a Pakistani infantry officer described how his company had 71 men when they crossed the LOC and took up positions near Kargil in India. 25 of those 71 were evacuated because of altitude sickness before the war even began. No replacements ever came. The soldiers were left to their fate as the Indian Air Force bombed their supply lines. Some Pakistani outposts subsisted on spoons of sugar for the last few days. But India's armed forces overcame far greater challenges as they fought the invaders in the world's mortal terrain. My name is Kabir Bedi, and today on Guns and Glory, we continue with the war in Kargil. As the Indian Army and Air Force began operations in Kargil, the chief of the Pakistani Army, General Pervez Musharraf, went on an official visit to China. Between May 26th and May 29th, 1999, he had several conversations over the phone with his trusted chief of staff, Lieutenant General Muhammad Aziz. In one of them, General Aziz reported about a meeting chaired by Nawaz Sharif, at which the chiefs of the Pakistan Air Force and Navy complained to Sharif that Musharraf had kept them in the dark about the invasion of the Kargil heights.
इस सारे ऑपरेशन की कामयाबी की बुनियादी वजह यही है कि इन्होंने लोगों को नहीं बताया अगर ये बताया जाते तो हमारा तजर्बा ये कहता है जैसे पहले सारी कोशिशें नाकाम होती रही, ये भी नाकाम हो जाती.
This telephone conversation was intercepted by RAW, India's intelligence agency, and made public. The transcripts were distributed to foreign embassies in Delhi. At once the world knew that from the beginning, Kargil had unquestionably been an operation of the Pakistan Army.
ठीक पीछे पाकिस्तानी घुसपैठी है, वहां से घुसपैठियों को हटाकर सेना के लिए एक बहुत बड़ी चुनौती है. पाकिस्तानी सैनिक.
The Kargil War was extensively covered on the ground by both the Indian as well as foreign electronic media. The government of Atal Bihari Vajpayee effectively used the media to convey to the world the level of duplicity that Pakistan was practicing.
Access was given to the Indian media by the Vajpayee government, but the focus of the Vajpayee government really was, on the body bags, because they wanted to whip up this passion and frenzy.
On the battleground, proof was there to see that those on top of the Kargil heights were no Mujahideen infiltrators, as claimed, but regular Pakistan Army units, following commands issued by their Rawalpindi headquarters. Each deadly thrust up the treacherous terrain of Kargil by the Indian Army was broadcast for the nation to see.
मेरे ठीक सामने उस पहाड़ी पर घुसपैठियों ने कब्जा जमा रखा है. शनिवार 7:45 बजे है और भारतीय सेना ने.
For the first time, Indians saw their heroes in action. And realized that they too were mortal men of flesh and blood, and it was only a brave death that anointed them with immortality.
The people who won the Kargil War for us were really the junior officers and the mid-level officers. I would say even the senior leadership failed because they kept touting the official line that, it was some rats have come in, we'll be able to clear them in 48 hours. As we know, the war went on for over 2 months.
The final assault to capture Point 5140 began from different directions. 3 battalions, 1 each from the Garhwal Rifles, Jammu and Kashmir Rifles, and the Naga Regiment were given the task of evicting the Pakistanis. Captain Vikram Batra of the 13 JAK Rifles and his Delta Company were among those tasked with recapturing Point 5140. Nicknamed Sher Shah for his unstinting courage, Captain Batra decided to attack from the rear to surprise the enemy.
Vikram Batra's company and another company, Bravo Company and Delta Company, were supposed to go through and climb a vertical cliff face to point, this 5140, which was the most dominating height in that area. From there they could see for miles around. And tackling that was not a joke. They finally assaulted it from the cliff face. They actually crawled up the cliff, and the Pakistanis were so surprised. They never expected an assault from the side. They were firing from the direction of the gentler slope, this relatively gentler slope where they thought they would come up from. And the entire there was a fierce hand-to-hand fighting there. The entire Pakistani garrison was either killed, most of them fell to their deaths from that steep height in trying to get away.
Inspired by the extraordinary courage of Captain Batra, the 13 JAK Rifles charged the enemy position and captured Point 5140 at 3:30 in the morning on June 20th, 1999.
Once we took the Pakistanis off this, thereafter it was, the turning point of that war. It was the turning point of that war. They could not, their artillery observation post officers could not then bombard our lines of communication.
The capture of Point 5140 set in motion a string of successes like Point 5100, Point 4700, Junction Peak, and 3 Pimples. Captain Batra led his men to even more glorious victories with the recapture of Point 4750 and Point 4875.
One of their boys was hit badly and he was lying in the open and he was crying, "Somebody get me, somebody help me." So one of the JCOs of Vikram Singh, he said, "Sir, I'll get him." Vikram laid a hand on his shoulder and he said, "Tu baal bachedar hai. मैं शरा हूं. You are married. Look, I have nobody behind me. He went to get that boy out. He dragged him out, and as he had almost brought him to safety, that is the time the Pakistani sniper shot him through his chest.
In the early hours of 7th July 1999, Captain Batra fell in battle while rescuing an injured officer during an enemy counterattack. He was awarded the nation's highest honor for gallantry, the Paramveer Chakra. Pakistan had thought that the scare of a nuclear war would force the Western powers to intervene. More importantly, Pakistan wanted Kargil to be linked to the bigger issue of Kashmir. But for once it seemed no one was ready to listen to Pakistan. The international community realized that Pakistan was playing a dangerous game. And even Pakistan's traditional allies, Turkey, the OIC, and even China, did not come out in support of Pakistan. In fact, Kargil bust the myth of an all-weather relationship existing between China and Pakistan. The Prime Minister of Pakistan, Nawaz Sharif, had been trying to get America to come out in support. The Pakistan Foreign Ministry kept up a constant litany of how India was violating the sanctity of the LOC.
In my lifetime.
But on June 15th, President Bill Clinton urged Nawaz Sharif to pull his troops out of Kargil. In the same statement, President Clinton praised India's restraint in keeping the war localized.
The same United States of America, which wasn't looking at this region till 1998 when we went nuclear, had already started contacting the Vajpayee government.
On June 17th, the Prime Minister's security advisor, Brajesh Mishra, went to Geneva to meet the G8 leaders and brief them about Kargil. He also handed over a letter from the Indian Prime Minister for the US President. The letter warned that India's patience was running thin and, if required, India would be forced to cross the LOC and take the war to Pakistan.
The decision not to cross the line of control, it had lots of pros and cons, and there are lots of people who felt we should have retaliated across the LC. But when we did not retaliate across the LC and we focused the fighting there, the world lost the casus belli to intervene in this conflict. They could not intervene, and we took 2.5 months, but we methodically sorted them out.
India's Vajpayee took the stand that we will not violate the line of control and we will not cross the line of control, and a lot of that was done in conjunction with the US.
Right from the beginning of the conflict, India had been very clear that it would respond with force. But many measures were taken to deter Pakistan from escalating the conflict into a full-scale war. On May the 20th, even before Indian action on the ground began, the Indian Navy was put on full alert. Naval and Coast Guard aircraft began a continuous surveillance along the western coast.
A lot of ships of the Eastern Fleet were brought to the Western Fleet. They sailed out, almost readied themselves to more or less carry out a blockade of, ready to carry out a blockade of Pakistan. Choke their harbors at Karachi and elsewhere. And the Pakistanis were shaken. You see, they had never expected this response. They felt it would be confined to the Kargil heights, local infantry action. Then they found air power brought in, then they found the Navy deployed. You see, that is what shook them up.
Amphibious forces of the Indian Navy from the Andaman Islands in the east were moved to the western seaboard. As the exercise shifted westwards, Pakistan moved all its major warships out of Karachi. It also had to escort oil tankers from the Gulf, anticipating attacks or a blockade by Indian ships, which limited their supplies. Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif later disclosed that at the time, Pakistan had just 6 days of fuel to sustain itself if a full-fledged war had broken out. While the Navy kept a watch on the sea, the fighting in the mountains intensified. But the all-important Tiger Hill still remained in Pakistani hands. Tiger Hill stands 16,700 feet high, overlooking Dras. It is a massive feature, almost 1 kilometer wide at its base, and was formidably defended by the Pakistanis. The Pakistani Northern Light Infantry had taken positions on top of Tiger Hill, as well as on the high ridge that ran to its west. Several peaks south of Tiger Hill had also been occupied by the Pakistani soldiers, and these provided observation points of the surrounding valleys and ridgelines. Point 4460, a kilometer south of Tiger Hill, was within supporting range of the NLI's artillery mounted on Tiger Hill. The Tingle Nala divided the complex, and Hill 4875 and Point 4540 stood opposite Tiger Hill. The Pakistanis defending Tiger Hill and the Western Ridge had moved in heavy ammunition to create an engagement area with interlocking fire from multiple sides. An anti-personnel minefield also blocked the approach from Point 4540. A 12.7mm gun atop Trig Hill, a peak 2 kilometers northwest of Tiger Hill, provided the Pakistanis additional heavy weapon support. Their artillery battery on Point 4388 fired into the engagement area as well. The Indian Army faced a nearly impossible task in recapturing Tiger Hill. India had captured Point 4460 in late May, and this provided a base to direct fire onto Tiger Hill. In order to conserve manpower, Pakistan's Northern Light Infantry abandoned Point 4540. Both these positions were to prove critical for India in mounting attacks on the Tiger Hill complex. Given the urgency, unacclimatized and poorly equipped soldiers of the 1 Naga and the 8th Sikh were sent to assault Tiger Hill. Murderous crossfire from the Pakistani positions inflicted heavy casualties on the Indian soldiers, and the assaults failed. The units surrounded Tiger Hill and dug in to wait. The Pakistan NLI launched counterattacks, but they lacked the numbers to push the Indian battalions off the hill. NLI soldiers even resorted to rolling boulders downhill onto the Indian forces. Then the Indian bombings began. As India's massive bombardment began, it stretched the Pakistani positions to the limit. India continued pounding the forward slopes of Tiger Hill and the ridge, with as many as 1,200 rounds exploding every 5 minutes. The Indian Army found an undefended flank on the east, and through this, they launched their attack on Tiger Hilltop. At the same time, a small raiding party penetrated Pakistan's line of defense on the western ridge. 25 soldiers of the 18 Grenadiers were ordered to advance and capture Tiger Hill. After scaling the rocks for 3 nights, they were just 50 meters below Tiger Hill when a stone slipped, giving away their position.
Seeing this, the enemy opened up heavy machine gun, grenade and rocket fire, and in hand-to-hand fight, the team leader Havaldar Madan Lal and 5 soldiers got killed.
But 7 soldiers who were near the Pakistani bunkers could neither advance nor retreat. One of them was Grenadier Yogendra Singh Yadav.
Sensing the gravity of the situation, Yogendra Yadav wanted to silence the automatic fire of enemy machine gun, which was coming from a bunker, by throwing a grenade inside it. He mustered up his courage, crawled up to the bunker and lobbed grenades inside the machine gun bunker and killing 4 Pakistanis in it.
Yogendra Singh sustained 15 bullet injuries and was the sole survivor of the 7 soldiers of the 18th Grenadiers who stayed on to fight the Pakistanis.
यहाँ पैर में हाथ में गोली मारी, लास्ट में उसने यहाँ पे गोली मारी। तो 3 दिन तो हो गए थे पहाड़ी में चलते चलते, पूरी पैंट फट चुकी थी पीछे से। तो पर्स रखा हुआ था यहाँ पर, पर्स में कुदरती तौर पर जो है गिलट के 5-5 रुपए के कई सिक्के थे। जब उसने गोली मारी तो वो सिक्के पे लगी तो रिकोचिट होगी गोली, तो मुझे एहसास लगा कि मैं मर गया। जब उसका दूसरा जवान बंदा साथी जो हमारे साथ पास आया वेपन उठाने के लिए, उसने मेरा AK-47 उठाया और वापस मुड़ा, तो मेरी एकदम आंखें खुली ऐसे जैसे नींद से जगा हूँ। अंदर से एक आया कि अब यार अभी तक नहीं मरा, तब मरेगा भी नहीं। मैंने अपना एक ग्रेनेड निकाला और उसके ऊपर ऐसे थूक दिया।
The injured Grenadier Yadav single-handedly kept on fighting and before falling unconscious passed on a vital piece of information. The Pakistanis were about to retreat. For his bravery, Yogendra Singh Yadav was awarded the Paramveer Chakra. The Pakistani forces had been split in two. They desperately tried to counterattack to join their lines. On July 8th, facing near certain defeat, the NLI abandoned Tiger Hill, leaving all their dead behind. While most of the Kargil war was fought around Kargil, there was one battle which was fought on the Siachen Glacier. Pakistan's NLI had occupied the Balal Post, 19,000 feet high, the highest point that divides Indian and Pakistani positions in Siachen, a height where soldiers have to fight for every breath. In an amazing feat of mountaineering, 48 heroic men of the Indian Army climbed 1,800 feet of near vertical rock face to surprise the Pakistanis and recapture Balal Post on June the 27th, 1999. Such is the grit of the Indian soldier. But for the Kargil war to end, Nawaz Sharif had to rush to Washington. On June 27th, Pakistan's army chief announced at a press conference that Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif would shortly be leaving for Washington to meet President Bill Clinton to find a solution to the Kargil crisis. At that time, Nawaz Sharif was in Beijing, meeting the leaders of China. On June 28th, he abruptly ended his China visit and returned to Pakistan. In Washington, President Clinton changed the dates of his planned vacation to meet Nawaz Sharif. The US had even pushed for Prime Minister Atal Bihari Vajpayee to travel to Washington, but Vajpayee refused. Bill Clinton met Nawaz Sharif on July the 4th. Behind the scenes, Pakistani and US officials sat across the table to hammer out the exact wording for the declaration that would follow. Bill Clinton's national security advisor, Samuel Berger, constantly discussed the wording with Vajpayee's security advisor, Rajesh Mishra, in Washington. In Delhi, Prime Minister Vajpayee waited for President Clinton to call and tell him that Pakistan would withdraw its remaining troops with immediate effect. By July 11th, the remaining units of the Northern Light Infantry began pulling back across the LOC as Indian bombardment continued. And Indian troops recaptured key peaks in the Batalik sector. India set a deadline of July 16th for all Pakistanis to return to their side of the line of control. On July the 12th, Nawaz Sharif went on television to explain to his people why Pakistan was retreating from Kargil. The war in Kargil officially ended on 26 July, but it had far-reaching consequences for the future. Kargil was the beginning of a tussle between Pervez Musharraf and Nawaz Sharif that resulted in Sharif being ousted in a military coup and Musharraf taking over as dictator. Today, the wheel has turned again, with Nawaz Sharif back in power and Musharraf being tried for treason. India learnt many lessons from Kargil. It ushered in long-term changes in the army's deployment and response strategy along the line of control. As the economy boomed, defense spending kept going up year after year. Kargil also made the Bofors guns legendary. And in Kargil, the Indian Air Force wrote the instruction manual for high-altitude air warfare. But war is war. And where there are guns and glory, there is also terrible death and suffering. We end this series with the idealistic hope that there are no more wars and that glory not depend on the barrel of a gun.